Well, I'm delighted to be able to respond to
You're up.
all right, thanks. To these excellent projects. And it is really difficult with just 5 minutes each, but I guess the goal here is to allow us to have more conversation. And I thought it worked quite well in the first panel this morning. So I will try to keep my comments fairly brief and just raise a few points. And to return us to the morning, I just wanted to, and I know more discussion happened also obviously in the middle panel, but I wanted to just get us to think about how so many different kinds of forms of collaboration have been articulated here today. Collaboration as narrative arc, collaboration as shared procedural literacy, collaboration through risk, collaboration through community involvement and transformation of social space, collaboration through argument, collaboration as dialogue, as changing the relations of the audience to the work, and as interactivity where hierarchies are hidden. In other words, one of the things that we've certainly learned today that there are a wide variety of collaborative practices at work in these various projects. And one of the things that I thought was interesting about this afternoon's panel, this particular group, is that we have a sort of a different sense of collaboration that adds to these vocabularies. So I thought one thing that was kind of interesting were these metaphors that came out about practice, the collaborative practices having a particular embodiment. You mentioned a choir, for example, in your piece, Melissa, at the very end. And Claudia said a very interesting thing about consensus building as a form of endurance, which I thought was really provocative to think about the way in which a group of people can get together and ultimately have to give over certain forms of power in order to function the next day and or continue to function in the group. And I think that that's significant to think about the way in which these practices are involved in forms of everyday practice has limits. And so then also I wanted to raise the question to all of the panelists and say a couple more things about limits to collaboration. I liked in the discussion as well the question raised about the team being more important than the project and all people playing positions in order to enrich a skill set so that the collaboration has a pedagogical framework or a pedagogical outcome. I thought that that was a very productive point to raise. And I think that sometimes collaborations are thought of as temporary rather than having a particular long-term outcome other than the product, other than the exhibition product, for example. And I thought that that was a very important point to raise. I also was very pleased in the last presentation to think about the way in which collaboration takes place on the part of the audience, and in this case, where the gameplay requires real political involvement in order to succeed as a game. And it sort of grounds a certain relationship to a broader cultural framework in the process of engaging the game, and also allows the player to feel as if they're joining in the larger project of the game and the game makers. And one of the things that, again, coming back to this question of limits, and I'd like to pose this question having to do with limits to this group. You spoke about limits, endurance as a kind of limit. You hit a limit of endurance with a group. You hit a limit of communication with the group. There was also this notion of a kind of limit of not being able to work with people directly from Darfur as a limit. And I would like each of you in turn to maybe articulate the way your group dealt with a particular limit. So in other words, when you were collaborating and there was a specific moment when you hit a limit and you felt the limit needed to be reached or surpassed, how did you deal with that? Whether it was a community group that was resistant or a vocabulary that was unshared, something like that. And actually, let me stop there. I have a couple of other questions, but I'd love you to respond to that question first, and then I have one.
Sure. Quick question. The one sort of anecdote that comes to mind most is with this current project. It's been going on for a while. It's been probably 5 years now. It came to a huge halt a couple of years ago because access to many, if anyone has dealt with the Department of Corrections in practically any state, it's just not easy, let alone for a couple of girls from LA wanting to talk to murderers. So it's not easy. And in a culture which to me actually was extremely educational and first. I mean, I had actually never been to states like Kentucky and Tennessee, and it was just a lot for me to learn. And learn how to just behave and body language and so forth. Point being that while we have been being granted access for about a year and a half, and it was going slow but well, all of a sudden sort of a series of events happened that we still don't quite understand exactly, but apparently we didn't follow rules that don't exist written anywhere, but apparently we didn't, and a moratorium on media was established. Somehow all the media projects were going on apparently, but somehow the moratorium existed for us. And it was really, really difficult. I mean, going on for a couple of years, and we had begun a letter of support writing campaign for the Society of Professional Journalists and consulting academics and so forth and so on. And it was a huge learning process. And in the end, though, there is a happy ending. We finally, after many hurdles, got into the office of the Commissioner of the Department of Corrections in Tennessee. And, we had to put together a presentation and frame our project in a way that, while factual and very much still true to what we were doing, was definitely contextualized for that office and that audience. And thank goodness that it worked out well, and, somehow the moratorium was lifted. But, again, having to work with so many people and convince them that the project is, there's, whether on the fringes or closely associated to the project, there's folks from the wide range of worldviews, philosophical views, religion. I mean, it is, and somehow all these people, I have to convince all of them, and we have to convince all of them that to please grant us access, please talk to us. We have good intentions. We have, which is hard actually when we're process, and also we're creatives and we're artists, and actually sometimes to figure out what the intent is actually not so clear. And that kind of makes sense for them. But I hope that answers your question. I'll talk about it later.
Actually, this is a fantastic point because it makes us think about things that we just took for granted in our practice, and it makes us unpack them, which is really fantastic. We faced two basic hurdles and limits: financial and political. Financially, this project is funded based on a second mortgage that I took out because it was in the hundreds of thousands of dollars because of all the trips and the equipment and so on. So we hit a limit, and luckily, I turned to my mother because she was able to help us when we simply ran out of money and we had to go, for instance, at one point to Palestine and Israel because we secured top interviews. We didn't have any money, so we turned to family. And I know this is not a model because, we were fortunate enough that I could do that. But that's one limit. The other limit is political, which speaks to the questions at hand here, and that is we were making projects or working in order to affect the status quo with respect to various issues. And when we released these products, these films that we worked on for years, they were accepted at different levels, for instance at PBS, and then when they come to the highest level, they get turned down. Precisely because they are considered, too critical or not acceptable, or we are asked to do certain things to them. But the whole idea we're working on these projects is because we want to change things, so we can do certain things to make them acceptable, because then they'll defeat the purpose. It's just like with gay rights. If you want to fight for gay rights and you're putting together, for instance, a film, but you are told that you need to change the language to make it acceptable to the mainstream audience, then what's the point? So these limits forced us to actually figure out innovative ways to disseminate over, various venues, from Netflix to Blockbusters to Amazon and so on. But most importantly, we actually conducted more than 110 screenings in universities throughout the country and community centers, many of which we actually did not get paid for because they didn't have the money, but we would cluster our screenings so that we can, just make the expenses to go somewhere, and then disseminate this information or these products to people and have discussions, which was the most rewarding thing. And because we were a large group of people, different people would go and do that, even though I did most of them, but whenever possible, given that we're all full-time, working full-time on other things, the limits that we faced, the local limits that we faced forced us to become innovative and to collaborate even more in order to go out and speak face-to-face with audiences. And that actually ended up being as much, if not more rewarding than actually doing the work. I mean, in terms of meaning, in terms of interacting with people. And I'm happy to, I just said to one of the organizers that we're happy to come here and for basically at cost share what we've done with the